Testing for cranial nerves 1 through 12. Olfactory cranial nerve 1. Have your patient close both eyes and plug one nostril. Hold a familiar smell under the open nostril and ask him or her to identify it. Test the other nostril with a different smell. Optic, cranial nerve 2. Hold the printed material approximately 18 inches away and have them read 2 sentences. Optic cranial nerve 2. While sitting in front of the patient at eye level, extend your right and left arm to the patient's shoulder while holding a long object. Move the object into the patient's peripheral field and have the patient point when they see the object. Optic cranial nerve 2 and oculomotor cranial nerve 3. The therapist shines the pen light into the patient's eye from approximately 8 inches away. The pupil should constrict. Observe the concentrical constrictions on the contralateral eye. Then repeat with the other eye. Oculomotor, cranial nerve 3, trochlear, cranial nerve 4, and abducens, cranial nerve 6. These nerves are usually tested together. To check for extraocular muscle movement, hold a straight object about 18 inches away from the patient's eyes. Ask your patient to track the object with his or her eye as you draw the letter H. Their head should not move. Start from the midline of the patient's face and be sure to hold at the end range of each motion. Conclude the test by moving the object towards the midline of the patient's nose. Trigeminal, cranial nerve 5. To evaluate the strength and symmetry of the masseter and temporalis muscle, put your fingertips on your patient's jaw and temples and ask them to clench their teeth. The muscle contraction should feel strong and even on both sides. Trigeminal, cranial nerve 5. Have your patient close both eyes. Lightly touch his or her forehead, cheek, and jaw on both sides of the face using a cotton ball. Have them tell you when they feel the cotton touch them. Facial, cranial nerve 7. To test the motor control of the muscles of facial expression, have your patient raise their eyebrows, frown, smile, pucker their lips, and puff out their cheeks. Also have your patient tightly close their eyes. Facial, cranial nerve 7. Assess the taste buds by touching a cotton applicator dipped in a sugar or salt solution on one side of the patient's tongue. Have a sign that says salty, sweet, and sour in front of the patient and instruct them to point at what they taste. Then repeat on opposite sides. Vestibular cochlear, cranial nerve 8. To test for hearing, stand behind your patient, rub your fingertips together, and have your patient point at the side they hear it. Vestibular cochlear, cranial nerve 8. To test the balance portion of this test, have the patient stick their thumb up in front of their nose. Have them maintain eye contact with their thumb and instruct the patient to turn their head as fast as they can until their thumb becomes blurred. Watch the response of their eyes. Glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve 9. Vagus, cranial nerve 10. Observe the patient's throat during swallowing. Spinal accessory, cranial nerve 11. To assess the strength of the trapezius muscle, place your hands on the patient's shoulders and have him or her shrug their shoulders as you apply resistance, ipsilaterally and bilaterally. Spinal accessory, cranial nerve 11. To test the strength of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, place your hand against the patient's cheek and have them turn their head as you apply resistance. Also have the patient flex their head and hold against resistance. Hypoglossal, cranial nerve 12. Have your patient stick out their tongue. Note any deviations from the midline. Ask your patient to move their tongue from side to side while you use the tongue depressor to prevent the movement. Note any lack of strength.